American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons.
Hello, Gary Stearman. Welcome to another edition of Prophecy in the News. Today's guest is the author of Blood Moons. His name, Mark Biltz. You've heard him before, but listen, you need to stay with us today. Mark Biltz, welcome once again to Prophecy in the News.
Well, thank you so much, Gary. I really am so excited to be here with you.
Well, I'm excited too, and everybody who's looked at this book or knows anything about it is excited. I don't think that we've ever seen anything in our lifetimes that is this blatant a display of prophetic, if you will, imminence.
I think you're totally right. You're totally right. And when I look at, again, Genesis 1:14, where God said he created the sun and the moon, 4 signs, 4 signals on his feast days. And then to have them coming in 2014 and 2015, that's important.
You know, Mark, you first came to Prophecy in the News back in 2008. J.R. Church was still with us. We had an incredible meeting, a program at that time. That started the ball rolling, and it's been nothing but faster and faster ever since, right down to the present day, because we are now in the year 2014, and this is a very special year in a lot of ways. Tell us about 2014.
Well, I think 2014 is very significant because this is when the first blood moon of the 4 blood moons happening this year. As a matter of fact, the first one begins in just a month from now, on Passover. And so 2014 is very significant because it is kind of setting the stage of what's to come. And then will be the other blood moon on the Feast of Tabernacles, the end of this year, and then it goes right into 2015. But the other significant thing about 2014 is it is the 6th year of the 7-year cycle. And this coming Rosh Hashanah begins the 7th year, the Shemitah cycle. So that is very significant.
Shemitah. Now, you may not have heard that word before, but stay with us because Mark is going to explain what a Shemitah year is in the Jewish calendar, why it's important. In fact, Mark, why is the Jewish calendar important? Let's just start with the Jewish calendar because a lot of people watching us may be perfectly familiar with the Gentile calendar, but they've never heard of the Jewish calendar. Why is it important?
I tell you what, Gary, it is the most significant calendar we have. If you remember, not too long ago, everyone was freaking out because of the Mayan calendar ending.
Sure.
I wasn't freaking out because that's not the one God uses. And so when God said in Genesis 1:14 that we were to use the sun and the moon for our calendar, we need to realize that Islam, the Muslims, only use the moon for their calendar. This is why Ramadan in one year would be in July, another year it might be in August or December. It rotates year to year because it's only based on the moon. Well, the calendar that we use is just a pagan solar calendar, and we need it. I mean, the Lord said we're in the world, but we're not to be of it. I like to mention when I was in Garden City, Kansas, I was on a time zone border. So everyone had to have 2 clocks, you know. So it's the same thing. We need our calendar, but it's not the one that God uses to communicate with us because the biblical calendar or the Jewish calendar is the one that uses both the sun and the moon.
Now, the Jewish calendar is complex. It has a lot of complexities. It has changeability that we're not familiar with.
Right. The difference is this. On our solar calendar, to keep spring in the spring and not in the winter, we make these adjustments. Every 4 years, we add a day. It's known as a leap year. But on the Jewish calendar, or the biblical calendar, I prefer to say, they add a leap month. An entire month is added 7 times over 19 years. This way, every 19 years, the sun and the moon are back in sync again as a cycle. This way, Passover will always be in the spring.
Well, and it should be because the Bible determines Passover, among other things, by the date of the barley harvest, and so we
Correct.
know it's a springtime festival. But let's go ahead now and talk about the Shemitah. Having kind of spoken about the biblical or Jewish calendar, the Shemitah year, which, by the way, is upcoming in, or shall we say late in the year 2014, is important for what reason?
for a lot of reasons. And I'd like to begin by reading from the scriptures and see what God says concerning the Shemitah year. Basically, for those listeners that aren't familiar, it's every 7 years the land of Israel was to rest. They weren't to plow the ground, but more than that, and this is what is so significant, I believe, prophetically with what's coming and why we need to be on God's calendar. The Shemitah year also had a lot to do with economics. If you remember a while ago, whenever there was bankruptcies, you could only file bankruptcy like once every 7 years. It may have changed to 10 now, but a while ago it was once every 7 years. That whole idea was a biblical principle. And let me read from you. This is from Deuteronomy chapter 15, and just verses 11 through 14. It says, "The poor are never going to cease out of the land. Therefore, God says, I command you, saying, you're to open wide your hand to your brother, to the poor, and to the needy in your land." And it says, if your brother, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, is sold to you, that's because they had to work. Biblical slavery isn't like we think slavery is, but someone had to work for somebody. He says he's to serve you 6 years, and then in the 7th year, you shall let him go free from you. And it says, and when you send him out from you, you shall not let him go empty. And so this shows you how what it talks about in the Bible had nothing to do with the slavery that we think of in the past couple hundred years. Because listen to this. It says, when you send him out free from you, you shall not let him go away empty. You're to furnish him liberally out of your flock and out of your herd, everything, so you're to bless them. So we see that it goes on to say that you were a slave in Egypt and you had to work. So the 7th year, I believe, is an economic reset. That's what it is. It's an economic reset that God had planned for the economy. Well, the amazing thing to me is this. Because I see the 7th year as an economic reset, what do we see happened in 2001? It was right at the Shemitah year, Rosh Hashanah, that there was an economic reset. The Dow fell 7% on Elul 29, the day before Rosh Hashanah. Exactly 7 years later, in the next Shemitah year, in 2008, now it wasn't the same day on our calendar, but on the biblical calendar, the exact same day, Elul 29, Rosh Hashanah, the Dow falls 7%, a 777-point drop on a $700 billion failed bailout. I mean, this is God affecting the economy in an economic year, the Shemitah year. And now what do we have? 2015 coming. And on Rosh Hashanah, this is at the end of the Shemitah year, we have a solar eclipse, followed 2 weeks later by a blood moon on the Feast of Tabernacles. That's a supermoon.
Wow. In other words, you've got these specific eclipses happening on specific dates. Well, let's just ask another question. Somebody might be saying, well, what's so special about that? Don't eclipses happen all the time? Maybe it's just sort of an accidental thing,
I love it. I love it. How many of you know, and I know you know, there is no coincidence with God.
True story.
Everything is planned. Well, do you know, if you go to NASA's website, they record all the eclipses over a 5,000-year period, okay? They say, and this is science, there were 12,000 lunar eclipses over the last 5,000 years. But guess what? Of those 12,000, only about 3,700 were total lunar eclipses. Okay, versus a partial or a penumbral. So if you think about this, if there's only around 3,700 total lunar eclipses over 5,000 years, that means you only average a total lunar eclipse every year and a half.
Okay, that's easy.
That's the math.
Easy to calculate.
Well, guess what? If you only average one total lunar eclipse in a year and a half, and here we have 4 total lunar eclipses in a year and a half.
Wow.
The statistics are astronomical, and then they're falling on the feast days as well.
And not just any feast days, but specific feast days, and we'll get into that in just a moment. So we're way beyond coincidence here.
It's huge, because the last one also is a super blood moon that is seen in Israel, okay, on the Feast of Tabernacles. And so
And
that's huge.
you know, they've been talking a lot lately about the supermoon. You know, a lot of television meteorologists will sometimes point out when a supermoon is coming. And by that, they mean that it looks extra large because of the lunar orbit. It's just a little bit closer to planet Earth.
Right.
So to have a moon that is closer to the Earth and still being eclipsed totally, that is, it's a blood moon, and on a Jewish feast day.
Yeah, the odds are truly astronomical because
are.
number one, when the moon is at perigee, which means its closest point to Earth for that particular month,
Right.
it's not always a full moon.
That's true.
It could be a new moon. And so you have to have a moon, and for example, this one in 2015 is not only at its closest point for the month, it's at its closest point for the entire year. So here you have the moon at its closest point of the year. It is a full moon. It is a total blood moon. It is seen in Israel. It is not only seen in Israel, it's seen in Israel on the Feast of Tabernacles. And greater than that, the other thing is this that is so mind-blowing, so statistically off the charts, is it's the end of the Shemitah year.
Well spoken. Now you've got some idea of why Mark is so excited and why he's written this book. And by the way, produced a DVD, which we'll tell you about a little bit later. But Mark, let's go on from there because you've been reading about the Shemitah year.
Oh, it is so incredible. And I think the viewers, you're going to be blown out of your socks when you hear this next verse. This is so incredible. This is so statistically off the charts. Fasten your seatbelts as I read this Bible verse. It's going to jump off the pages like you've never seen before. This is from Deuteronomy chapter 31. Mm-hmm. This is verse 10 through 12. Listen to what it says. And Moses commanded them, saying, at the end of every 7 years, in the solemnity of the year of release, in the Feast of Tabernacles.
Wow.
So here, this super blood moon happens on the Feast of Tabernacles at the end of the 7th year. And so what does it say God wants to have happen? It says this, when all Israel is come to appear before the Lord your God in the place which he shall choose, you're to read this law before Israel in all their hearing. It says, gather the people together, the men, the women, the children, even the stranger that's within your gates, that they may hear, learn, and fear the Lord your God, and observe to do all the words of this law. Now, the amazing thing about that, only the men were required to be in Jerusalem for the Feast of Tabernacles. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the 7th year, everyone had to appear, okay, the men, the women, the children, even the stranger and the foreigner, you know, that's grafted into Israel. Well, when it says you shall assemble, in Hebrew, the word you there is in the singular. That meant it was incumbent upon one person who had the authority to gather everyone together. Well, guess who that is? It's the king of Israel. So, at the end of every 7th year, it's the king of Israel who wants to assemble his body together to hear the king of Israel read from the law, okay, and gather all the men, women, children, and foreigners. So here we have the super blood moon on the Feast of Tabernacles at the end of the 7th year when everyone is assembled together to hear the king of Israel read.
Wow. Now, that's only the beginning. This is phenomenal. The moon and the sun. We're not talking about astrology here. Astrology is the thing that you open the daily newspaper and it says you're a certain sign and such is going to happen to you today. We're not in that ballpark at all, right?
Not at all. There's a big difference between astrology and biblical astronomy. Astrology says it's all about you. Well, you may be special, but it's not about you. You know, and it's the same thing. The biblical astronomy is where we realize it's all about God. He even says in Psalms 19, the heavens are declaring the glory of God.
Amen.
And so I believe as long as we're focused on him declaring his story, not our story, we won't fall into error.
So here we are, 2014. We are, as we make this program today, we're not very far away from the first blood moon eclipse. Let's talk about the term blood moon now. And why is it called a blood moon?
Sure. Well, the reason why is because it's the color waves, the light waves, as they go around the earth, you know, and hit the moon. when the earth is in between the sun and the moon. The lighter rays, the blue rays, reflect through the atmosphere, and only the longer red color from the light spectrum hit the moon. And so the moon turning to blood doesn't literally mean it turns to blood. It means it turns that blood red color.
And I think most of us have seen a total eclipse, and it does turn reddish because the Earth's atmosphere filters out the blue light,
Exactly.
just leaves the red light, and there you have a blood moon. The word blood, has certain connotations to it.
Especially on Passover.
Especially on Passover. Tell us now about what's going to happen. We're just on the cusp here of going into this blood moon cycle.
Well, the thing is this. I think everyone believes the Bible that listens to this program.
Yes.
And they always say, if God says it, I believe it, and that settles it. Well, in Genesis 1:14, God said he created the sun and the moon to send signals on his feast days. Even Jesus in Luke 21:25 says there will be signs in the sun and the moon. Isaiah, Joel, the Gospels, Revelation talks about the sun turning to sackcloth and the moon to blood. But I want to read from you Joel, because I think this is so significant. This is from Joel chapter 3, and it is verse 2. And listen to the context. Listen to the context. It says, God says, I'm going to gather all the nations, and I will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will plead with them there for my people, for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and have parted my land. So here, in the context of what we're looking at, they're trying to divide the land of Israel. Well, what's happening right now? We have our politicians, the government, the State Department, is pushing to divide the land of Israel. And in that context, what do we see in verse 14 through 16? It says, multitudes and multitudes are in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. The sun and the moon will be darkened. So here, in the context of the darkening of the sun and the moon, we see the nations are coming together to try to divide the land of Israel. That's where we are today. So I see these four blood moons prophetically, what they represent, just like if there's a red flashing warning light on the highway, that's warning you to stop. You need to look both directions before you go forward, because danger is possibly there.
Yeah.
Well, I think these four blood moons over these next year and a half is a warning signal to Israel not to divide their land. I think the solar eclipses that are coming on the biblical dates this next year and a half is a warning to the nations not to divide God's land. And I would hope that the world would repent and we wouldn't try to divide the land of Israel, and then maybe nothing would happen.
Well, Mark, even as we speak, the United States State Department has issued its proclamation in the matter, telling the Palestinians that they need not refer to Israel as a nation.
Yeah, not a Jewish state.
Not a Jewish state.
Right, that's horrible.
It is. It is essentially a denial of something that we have all accepted since 1948.
Well, it's amazing they don't demand the Arabs that they allow it to be a partially Jewish in an Arab state. How can the Arabs get to have an all-Islamic state, and there's dozens of Arab states, but how come Israel can't be a Jewish state?
By the way, I should mention our upcoming Orlando Prophecy Conference, March 28th through 30th. Mark Biltz is going to be one of our prominent speakers. And Mark, I can't wait. I'm sure you've got so much to show the audience, complete with all kinds of audiovisual aids and so forth. It's going to be phenomenal, and we're very pleased that you're coming.
Oh, thank you. One of the things that I didn't share at the Colorado conference that I will share at this conference, and so I'm so glad that you're going to be live streaming this as well to all of the viewers.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm going to show a pattern, and this is what's amazing. Do you know there were solar and lunar eclipses for 3 years around the destruction of the temple in 70 A.D.? In 69, 70, and 71 A.D., solar lunar eclipses. And then also when Jesus died, in that time frame, in 32 and 33 A.D., solar lunar eclipses all around the death of Yeshua. So when God says he would send signals through the sun and the moon on his feast days and historical events, I'm going to prove that.
Great. And even if you don't come to Orlando, you'll still be able to watch Mark on live streaming video. Hello, Gary Stearman here with Bob Ulrich to talk with you about our upcoming Orlando Prophecy Summit, March 28th through 30th. Bob?
The big event is almost here. There are close to 2,000 people registered. There's still a few spots left, but the next best thing to being there is live streaming. We're here today to make that announcement. We're going to have some incredible messages live streamed from the main auditorium at the Renaissance SeaWorld Hotel in Orlando.
You'll hear men like Mark Biltz, and he has thrilled audiences everywhere with his famous blood moon phenomenon lectures.
L.A. Marzulli, fresh off a trip to Peru, where he's uncovered evidence that we believe may be DNA evidence of the Nephilim.
Chuck Missler, who never fails to come up with an amazing prophetic message.
Jonathan Kahn, author of The Harbinger, and many, many more. All you need to do is go to prophecyinthenews.com. There's a $50 live streaming fee to have all these messages brought into your home. Go and sign up and register today.
Well, Mark, I can't wait to go on here. We're right in the middle of something very exciting. You know, we were reading from the book of Joel, and one of my favorite verses in the Bible at the moment is Joel 2:31. The sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord come. Well, that's the tribulation.
Right.
And it says that before the tribulation, the world will see these signs. How much clearer could it be?
And the Feast of Tabernacles 2015 begins a new 7-year cycle.
Begins a new 7-year cycle. The Shemitah we were talking about.
Ends in 2015. So could it be the tribulation begins the fall of 2015?
It could. And by the way, I want to be quick to say
We're not
I'm not
setting
setting a date. Mark is not
No.
setting a date, and we don't believe in date setting, although it's awfully hard not to, right?
Well, for me, I just like looking at the pattern.
Right.
And so, hey, just like any detective, when he tries to solve a murder mystery, they're trying to do a profile of the suspect. Well, the thing is this, all we're doing is profiling, trying to figure out, and, you know, like I said, when I grew up, I loved the Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, you know,
Oh, yeah.
Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn. I loved adventure. I loved detective work like Dick Tracy. For me, I'm just a kid having fun, looking at the Bible. I'm not one of these people that say it has to be this way. I don't know. I just want to get people to be looking up, to loving the Lord with all their heart, mind, soul, and strength. And researching this with me, finding out whether these things be so.
Yeah, Mark and I agree on one point. That is, that it is the Holy Spirit among us who leads us into these discoveries when the time is right. You know, I think that the fact that he has led you along the way he has may be an indicator of the times in which we live, because this particular truth was not really talked about at all. And before what, about 2008?
Yeah,
so?
exactly. Yeah, I don't know of anyone. Now, so what's amazing to me is a couple thousand years ago, in Jewish writings, they were talking about eclipses. They were talking about how a solar eclipse refers to judgment on the nations, and a total lunar eclipse on Sukkot, you know, the Feast of Tabernacles is judgment time for Israel. But no one made the connection until I did in 2008. Now, there's been many books written since then by other authors, you know, going off on all different directions, some good, some maybe some not so good, about my discovery. But it wasn't in 2008 until then when I discovered the connection between the calendar and the eclipses that we put together this calendar.
I'm going to talk for a moment about, or let Mark talk about this new calendar you come out with. It's Sukkot 2015 is the title on the calendar. This begins to document the Shemitah, right?
That's exactly what it is. It goes through the Shemitah year. It's a 16-month calendar. It begins this September and goes through the September of 2014 all the way through December of 2015.
And by the way, you can see the blood moons illustrated, and they're very clearly and graphically illustrated according to the date and the way they fall, and the Jewish calendar dates are very clearly shown. Even if you're not familiar with that calendar, you'll find that it's easy to read, by the way. And we're offering that, I say Mark is offering that in addition to the book, Blood Moons, and a DVD, which, by the way, I have seen, and it's wonderful, well edited, extremely well produced, and it'll keep you going throughout. There's so much more in here than we've had an opportunity to talk about, Mark, but you've done well.
Well, thank
and
you.
the producers of the DVD have done very well. We're offering here these items, 4 items in a package: the book, the DVD, the calendar, and a bonus DVD from Colorado Springs. When Mark began his presentation, That was extremely well received last
Yes.
year at Colorado Springs. And I know you talked to a lot of people in person about that. We're calling this the Blood Moons 2 package. If you call the 800 number on your screen, ask them for the Blood Moons 2, number 2, package. They'll know what you're talking about. However, all of the above, plus the Feasts of the Lord study guide and a 5 DVD set on the Feasts of the Lord added to this, will result in what we're calling the ultimate Blood Moons package for only $89.95. Call the 800 number on your screen and ask for either the Blood Moons 2 package or the extra 2 items, the ultimate Blood Moons package for $89.95. I'll tell you what, you'll be glad you did. There's so much information there. The Blood Moons 2 package, $59.95. The ultimate Blood Moons package, $89.95. Mark, we still have a couple of minutes to continue now. How should we round this conversation out?
Well, the thing that I want to point out is the importance of that calendar that we have. What it does, it's a 16-month calendar, but it intertwines our normal Gregorian calendar with the biblical calendar. So that means over this next year and a half, if something historic happens, you can go back and see what day it is on the biblical calendar. So you can see if there's any prophetic significance. So this is huge. This is the only calendar that not only intertwines the Gregorian and the biblical calendar, it's the only one that has all the eclipses intertwined also in that calendar. The pictures are absolutely gorgeous. They were from photos that we took when we were on our Israel tours. And then it also has your Bible reading for the week. You know, we mentioned the different scriptures to read, both the Old Testament and the New Testament. So it has all of the Jewish holidays or biblical holidays highlighted as well. So it's a very exciting calendar. No one offers a calendar like this one, and our staff worked real hard producing it. It's a custom calendar.
Before we went on today, Mark mentioned that in the last 2,000 years, we've only had 8 instances of 4 blood moons occurring together.
On the feast days.
On the feast days. Only 8 times in 2,000 years.
It's incredible.
It is incredible.
And then when you look at the pattern, the last time it happened was 67 and 68 when Israel recaptured Jerusalem. The time before that, right after they became a nation in 48. The time before that was at the Inquisition when all were kicked out of Spain. And then, of course, you see these eclipses in 32 and 33 A.D. around the death of Yeshua, 70 A.D. around the destruction of the temple.
Something is happening.
Most definitely. Get ready. Get ready, viewers.
Mark, I'm so happy to have been able to talk with you today, and thank you for joining us here on Prophecy in the News. Keep watching, and one way to do it is to call in and get that calendar and the DVD and the book so that you'll really know in detail what Mark's talking about. Mark, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Gary. Blessings.
Come again soon, and we'll talk to Mark as things develop. I'm Gary Stearman. Keep looking up, everybody. Prophecy in the News is a viewer-supported program made possible by our many friends around the world. Be sure you tune in every day for breaking news and our daily prophetic news updates at prophecyinthenews.com or follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/prophecyinthenews.